February 1852, a 38-year-old Giuseppe Verdi attends a performance of La Dame aux Camélias, a staging of Alexandre Dumas's brief story of his love affair with a Parisian courtesan. Completely encaptured by the story, Verdi rushes home and sets it to music. 1 year later, and La Traviata, The Fallen Woman, is premiered. At first, it receives a not-so-great reception, but Verdi makes revisions. And with these revisions, the story of Violetta Valeri and Alfredo Germont is one that has captivated audiences ever since. And now, it is the most popular and performed opera in the world. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Angel Blue, and in just a few weeks, I'll have the wonderful pleasure of stepping into the shoes of Violetta as I perform for the very first time at the Royal Opera. We've just heard the wonderful singers Charles Castronovo and Ermonela Jaho sing the beautiful Act 3 duet, Parigi, cara. Next, you'll hear me speak with them in just a little bit, but for right now, we're going to speak a little bit about Parisian courtesans. Please welcome, from the University of Manchester, Professor of Music, Susan Rutherford. Hi, Susan. Thank you for joining me today. I would like to know, what significance does La Traviata have in the arc of Verdi's career?
Well, this was the 18th opera that he'd written over the past 14 years. So he's about 2/3 of the way through his total output. And it's the last opera in his famous trilogy of the 1850s that had begun in 1851 with Rigoletto, and then just 6 weeks before the premiere of La Traviata with Il Trovatore.
Wow, that's fascinating. And so how does La Traviata actually fit into this trilogy?
Well, the trilogy marked a departure from the rather martial operas he'd written in the 1840s. This is a trilogy about personal relationships, about intimacy, and all the major female characters are in some way on the edges of society. There is a very young 16-year-old Gilda who is seduced and raped by the Duke. There's Azucena the gypsy in Il Trovatore, a much older woman. And then there is Violetta, a courtesan.
Do you feel that Violetta is any different really than the other women because of her profession?
I think that there is the sense of a development here in the way Verdi approached this role. This was somebody that he sought to capture all the nuances in her personality. He marked her psychological development from the beginning of the opera to the end in 3 different voices. You know that there is, in a sense, it requires from the singer a coloratura soprano in the first act, a lyric soprano in the second act, yes, and a dramatic soprano in the third act. And this was something very new for opera to really embed the being of a character through all these different vocal nuances.
Yes, and because of those vocal nuances, as you put them, do you think that it's very difficult for sopranos to sort of navigate their way through the role?
Absolutely. I mean, I mean, I'm not a soprano. You are the one really to tell us all about this, but often I think what's said is that sopranos tend to gravitate more to one of those 3 than they do to another. So, and some might be, you know, really confident with 2 aspects of the role, but a bit wary of the third. To find those of you who can sing in 3 different voices, evenly matched, is extraordinary.
Yes, evenly matched, and also with the character, because she's actually almost, yes, like 3 different people, yes, in the opera as well.
Yes.
Yes. Wow, Susan, thank you so much. We'll speak a little bit later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, please welcome back Ermonela Jaho and Charles Castronovo. That was a beautiful duet, you guys. That was just wonderful.
Thank you very much.
So I'm so excited to speak with both of you because I view you as my colleagues, and I've looked up to both of you for a very long time in this role. But I have to share that, so both of you have sung this more than 100 times. Why on earth do you keep coming back to this piece?
Well, you have over 200, right?
Yeah,
I have over
150 something. But because, you know, my dream started with Traviata. I wanted to become an opera singer when I've seen for the first time Traviata, and it's like dreaming every time. So why stop dreaming? So that's why I love it every time I sing that role. So
yes,
never getting tired.
Yeah. And Charles, what about you?
For the money. No, I'm just kidding. No, just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, it's a beautiful role. I love it. It's one of those roles for every young tenor and lyric tenor to do a lot, because it has a lot of emotions. It's one of those roles that when you do it right, it shouldn't sound like it's very difficult, even though it is very tricky. So it's one of those things that keeps you in a good spot, you know, so it's good to come back to all the time. So that's why I do it.
That's great. And so both of you are doing the live relay, the cinema relay, on January 30th. I'm actually really looking forward to sitting in the theater and having some popcorn watching you sing.
Right.
What is it that the audience can look forward to on January 30th?
We worked so often with Charles, and not only with Charles, but the team of this production. We are a family, and if we all together we're putting our passion, our love, our souls in this love story, I can say, if we believe in that, I'm sure the public and in cinemas, they will have the same love story, the same emotion. We will do our best, so
Yeah.
last word is
Yes.
public. So
Yeah. The good thing about it, though, is because I think with the cameras and everything, you know, you have some close-ups and everything. And normally in the theater, you know, you have this bigger view. But in this case, you can really see the, you know, blood, sweat, and tears, which is actually really interesting
Tears,
sometimes, you know. Which is, you know, it can be really beautiful. And you see, you know, everyone swallowing it. You know, I mean, this is how it really is, obviously, as you know. So it's quite interesting for, I think, for, you know, the watcher to see something much more detailed, more realistic. And so I think that's probably the most interesting thing about it. And so I will be doing as much as I can that day to give a little extra for the movie,
Yes. Well, opening night is January 14th, and the audience doesn't know this, but I had the pleasure of sitting in on your rehearsal today and just watching really great singing, number one, and also acting.
Oh, thanks.
But I have to ask you, so between now and the 14th of January, how will you preserve your voice given so many rehearsals and interviews and things like that?
Well, for example, today was tough. We've been going all day,
the whole
and
day.
then this, and tomorrow we have orchestra again in the morning on stage. So yeah, I don't know. I guess about taking it easy and singing where you
and
where
thinking,
you need to.
know, every day, you know, it's thinking only for the day that you are rehearsing, and the next day, let's see.
Do you kind of pull back emotionally in these days leading up to it?
Sometimes, yeah. But it's difficult because the music is so beautiful, and it brings, you know, it's a challenge there, you know, to give or not to give so much.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. Even when you don't sing full voice, it's, you know, you still have to
still
put the energy into it.
You need the energy,
Yeah.
and it's that kind of stamina and working every day. So in somehow we build that kind of strength, you know, to be ready for this kind of schedule.
Yeah, it takes a lot of energy, and no matter what I do in the show, every time she dies, so it's nothing. You know, nothing changes every time. It's just no matter what you do. So
Well, speaking of her death, why do you think that Alfredo falls in love with Violetta?
I think Alfredo is he's a very honest person. You know, he's a bit naive. Maybe he grew up in the country, but I mean, I think he's very intelligent but naive. And so I think Violetta, for him, is something he had never seen before. You know, maybe he sees the nice country girls, you know, who are very proper and everything, but Violetta's something completely on a different level. You know, her grace, the way she moves, the way she looks, you know, her confidence. I think that's what makes him crazy. You know, he never saw a woman like that before. So I think that's what it really is. Yeah.
That's lovely. And Ermonela, why do you think that she's a worldly woman. You know, why would she fall in love with this naive young man?
Yeah, because he's different. That's why he's different. The way how he proposes to her, how he's taking care of her. And especially when she was sick in that period, she was so alone because you have to be beautiful and everyone is going to be, you know, after him. And he was the only person Alfredo was the only person who came every day asking about Violetta when she was sick, and something so special, so different. So it made her, you know, let's see this guy, you know, how he's doing. So that's why, and that's love sometimes, you know, something that you don't expect. It comes in that situation.
I'm going to deviate from the script a little bit and do a singer thing and ask both of you, can you give a word of advice to anyone who wants to sing Violetta or Alfredo? And how on earth do I get to 200 performances myself?
Violetta is so difficult, you know that very well. So for a soprano to reach that point, to sing this role and to survive, let's say, you know, vocally, it's, you know, you have to exercise every day, the scales, the bel canto. It's that kind of exercising every single day. So, and because it's an opera, it's a role when you have to have everything. Sometimes it says that you need 3 voices, but in my opinion, you have to have, one voice, but with a good technique, and to have the bel canto, the coloratura, and everything. So, and it's a hard work every day. I can't say this is a recipe, but and everybody is different. So we have to adapt this kind of technique. Let's say to build that kind of stamina you know, to be ready and to survive with this role.
With so many performances, though, when did you actually feel like you really knew the role, like it was completely in your body?
Actually, I discover new things every day, every single time I sing Violetta, because our body changes for an opera singer, especially for the women. Our body changes a lot, and everything is about the muscles, because we don't sing only with the vocal cords. Yes, the vocal cords, they have their vibration, but it's the whole body, it's the instrument who's sustaining those vocal cords. So, and your body changes, and every time you sing, every time you see different things, so you discover, every time you sing Violetta, sing this role, you discover new things. So every time I sing it, every time I discover new things. Sometimes it comes easier than before, sometimes more difficult, so I have to pace and to find the balance, always the balance.
Yes.
So searching all the time.
And Charles, what about you?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, for any, let's say, young or lyric tenor, this is a great role to keep you in shape in a way, because it's not necessarily very high or very low. It's a lot of passaggio work, but it's not constantly in the passaggio. You have to develop the middle of the voice too. But beyond that, it's very emotional. He starts out so sweet and innocent, then he's completely in love, and then he's full of remorse, then he gets crazy jealous, and in this scene, in the Flora scene, and he throws the money at her. If you let too much emotion out, it can affect the voice too. You have to keep yourself, there's a line there that you have to keep a good balance on. And then, of course, at the end, my favorite part, not really, is Parigi or cara, for example, because after all night you've been singing with a lot of emotion, and you come in and you say, oh, Violetta, Violetta, and then all of a sudden it goes to boom, clou, 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 and you just think, this is the last thing I want to sing right now, because of, you've been letting all the voice out, and you have to bring it back as much as you can. So it's, you need a very good kind of discipline to get through it the right way. So that's the best thing it's for discipline, I think. And and of course practicing how to put the emotion into the voice without letting it get too out of hand. So it's really good for that, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So what can we look forward to on opening night? You've done this together so many times. If you could just name one thing off the top of your head.
Well, I think in this case, because we both feel very comfortable in the production,
Sure, absolutely.
it kind of freed us up, and we just finished a run together in
Paris,
Paris. Yeah.
actually, yeah.
So also very beautiful, but not as, let's say, warm and kind of. This one we
familiar.
We feel kind of more comfortable. So I have a feeling in this one, it's we're gonna kind of get to even the next level that we already.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that's what's gonna happen.
And I repeat that it's the teamwork,
Yeah.
because it's the whole family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are, okay, Alfredo and Violetta talking here, but it's the whole work. Everyone is putting really a lot of effort, and and it's gonna be something special, emotional, absolutely emotional. Because
Emotional
if you don't put emotion, better
Emotion
don't do
and
this.
teamwork.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's wonderful. Well, what a pleasure to speak with both of you. Thank you so much for
And
joining
toi,
me.
toi, toi to you
Toi, toi,
too.
toi to both
Yeah,
of you.
toi, toi, toi.
Have a great opening
Thank you
night.
so much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you.
Jaho and Charles Castronovo.
Thank you, Angel.
La Traviata has some of the most memorable music of the operatic repertoire. Let's hear more about how the music takes us on this journey through the opera. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome repetiteur James Hendry.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've been given the rather difficult task of trying to teach you something, or trying to explore with you some of the best music in opera. Now that's quite difficult for me, especially because I've only got about 10 minutes to do it in. La Traviata, Verdi, the king of opera, should we say. As Angel said, it has some of the best known tunes in music, never mind opera, in music. I think everybody knows. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm actually going to explore very, very shortly about the role of Violetta in particular. And as we all know, Violetta dies at the end, sad face. but how Verdi, through his writing, sort of tells us in the music that this is happening. I'm going to actually start, though, before I introduce my lovely singer, I'm actually going to bore you a bit more and talk about the prelude. The prelude sets up the whole thing. You know from the first note that it ain't going to be a particularly happy evening. Played on just violins by itself. And Verdi even writes for not all of the violins in the orchestra to play that. So you get this icy, quite hollow sound. And this theme appears at the very beginning of the third act, where Violetta, it's, you know, love, she's gone, basically. You get this, and then it's followed by two other little themes. One you will know, one that you might not know so much. So the whole prelude is just basically telling you what's going to happen, the whole story almost, before it's even happened. You could listen to the prelude after I've told you this and not bother coming to see the opera, because you know it all. We then get this melody. And then he interrupts it. Now, this melody, most of you will know, is the big part in Act 2 where Violetta just can't help herself. She goes, "Alfredo, I love you." It's big, the whole orchestra's playing. It's very high in the soprano's voice, but it actually fits into quite a sweet spot in the soprano's voice as well. The A, B flat area is quite, for most sopranos, I'm sure Angel will agree, it fits in a most wonderful part of a soprano's voice. It's not too high, but it's not too low, but it lets the voice bloom, and it's full of warmth. Now, what Verdi does next in the prelude is he then sticks the whole melody, which was once played by the whole string section, down. And then he puts this little counter melody over the top. Now, I've tried to read about this quite a lot, and nobody really can tell me where that's come from. They just go, "Oh, it's a counter melody." I don't think it is. I think it's come from somewhere. In fact, I think it comes from the very end of Act 2, where Alfredo's gone, you know, he's just shamed her in front of everybody, and then we get the wonderful concertante where everybody sings. And Alfredo's feeling the remorse about what he's done. What's the name? What's the name? Violetta, that's the one. Violetta's also saying how much she loves Alfredo and will love Alfredo even when she dies. And they all, both of them sing this melody. That sounds very much like this. So he's actually putting that melody, the love melody, against which for me symbolizes the turmoil and all of everything that's happened in Act 2. So he's completely, in the prelude, he's completely setting up what is going to happen. It's probably one of the most famous preludes in the whole of opera. But actually, if you actually think about it, it's told you the whole story. I'm going to now talk about Violetta. I remembered the name this time. Talk about Violetta. One of the hardest roles in opera, I would say, because it basically needs 3 different voices in one person. The first act, Violetta is full of life, absolutely full of life. And I'm sure we all know the aria, Sempre, libera. I'm going to introduce my wonderful friend, Anush Hovanesian. Come join me, darling. So how does Verdi write for this young, full of life soprano? How does he write for that? How does he portray that? I'd say these 2 words, vocal fireworks. I'm going to get Anush to sing a bit of the cabaletta for us. I'm not going to make her sing the hard cadenza beforehand because that would be too awful for me to do to her. But we're going to go straight from Sempre, libera, okay?
Sempre libero, decido galleggiare di gioia in gioia, lo che scorro e viver mio bei sentieri di piacer. Nasca il giorno muoia, sempre libera e ritrovi.
I'd describe that as vocal fireworks, wouldn't you? It's not even vocal, some of it. Yabba-dabba-dabba-dabba-dum. I mean, I could do that. I also have 10 fingers. Another interesting thing about the aria is this de-vola, de-vola. Yeah? These constant offbeats, which later on I will tell you about more, which I think these constant offbeats has something to say about her developing illness. We go into Act 2, and she sings this phrase. Again, completely different voice needed for this. So you need a very, very good soprano that has access to loads of different parts of her voice, that can do lots of these things, the coloratura, the fireworks, and then this big expansive stuff when she's saying, Alfredo, I love you. Love me like I love you, yeah? I hope you love me like I love you. I'm sure you can agree that's very different to what we just heard in the first act. Completely different voice, completely different phrasing and shaping needed. And also, this pulling and breath control needed. And actually, for someone that is eventually going to die of consumption, breath becomes a big problem. How does Verdi show it? I hear you ask. I heard somebody ask that. How does Verdi show it? Now, we get to the very, very end of the second act, the bit I described before, where Rodolfo has just shamed her in front of everybody. And she sings this most beautiful tune, and it's a wonderful tune, wonderful melody. I'm going to get her to sing it very much like she just sang that last excerpt. Molto legato, completely joined up, molto legato, molto legato, molto legato. Yeah? This is the Alfredo, okay? So I'll just give you a little bit before. Beautiful, huh? Beautiful. Thank you. Now, I'm sure you'll agree, very beautiful sound, very beautiful melody, one of the kings of melodies. Does it mean much? I'm going to get her to now sing what Verdi actually wrote. It's not legato. There are rests between every single tiny phrase. I mean, you can argue that the rest means she needs to take more breaths, which is going to show her consumption more, or the rest just mean that she's so hurt by the situation, what's just happened, that she can't actually piece together the full phrase. I'm sure you'll agree that this second time, it will mean so much more when we sing, when we forget about the beautiful sound and the beautiful legato, and actually did what Verdi wrote, which is put in all of these quite specific rests and then these little accents in the orchestra, that just that little push and pull. Same thing, yeah? Means something completely different now, doesn't it? Fascinating. We do what's written on the page and it comes across. But my point being is, again, that's a very, very different style of singing and a different need to put on the voice than the other two excerpts we've heard. I'm going to go into Act 3. Get your tissues out. I'm actually going to get Anush to eventually, to finish my little talk, I'm going to get Anush to sing the whole aria at the end, the Addio del Passato. I want to talk about a couple of things first. A, I mentioned earlier these accents and offbeats and what they're going to do to this aria. And then the way Verdi writes, especially towards the end of the aria, where he even writes morendo, dying away, and then on the very last note, which is really extremely hard for the soprano, especially after a 3-hour opera, is to do un fil di voce, which is, you can translate it in many ways, but it's a fine voice, like a thread on a top A, which is not easy. But it shows so much. And first, Anush, could you just sing straight on, addio, and just sing it again, legato, as your singing teacher would have taught you. Beautiful. Again, beautiful singing, isn't it? Now, Verdi writes it should be pianissimo, which she did, but he's put this. Addio del passato. Yeah? It'll mean something completely different. What do these accents mean? You decide for yourselves, but it says something about the character. Okay? Beautiful. Means something different now, doesn't it? Now, before we have to go, we might not get a full performance in, but I'll try and squeeze one in. Last point. Now, can you sing me a tutto fini from that phrase? Again, as your singing teacher taught you, beautifully legato, vowels in the right place, wonderful. Do what you want with the top A. I'm not going to tell you to sing it in any way. I just want you to sing it, okay? So I'll give you... Beautiful. Wonderful top A. Now, I'm going to let you into a secret. What I'm about to ask her to do is very hard, bearing in mind we're being live streamed all over the world. Okay? Bear with us. Now, can we do what Verdi actually wrote? A tutto fini. A tutto with the morendo, which is the dynamic. Tutto fi. Just as it's about to get hard, you write something else. Un fil di voce, as fine as you possibly can. Yeah, some sopranos might do this. Yeah? Okay. Good. Same place, darling.
Thank you, Anush. I'm going to be joined now by the conductor of this opera. Please welcome Maestro Anatello Manacorda. Ciao, Maestro. Ciao, Maestro. Thank you for joining me, Maestro. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here with you. We haven't actually had the opportunity to work together yet, but I was in the rehearsal today and I really enjoyed what I saw. Maestro, everybody knows this piece. So what is it like, though? We know what it's like to sing it, but what is it like to conduct it?
Well, conducting this piece is living it. You're not, as a conductor, you usually put together everything, the orchestra, but I like to think that I'm on stage with them, and with the two singers who are sitting here with you tonight, I always try to be really next to them, in them, so with you, when you will sing this with me. And so I live it, basically. I am inside the opera and the characters especially. So it's very important that, because you as singers are every evening different, and there is a different temperature, you have a different mood and all that, and I have to help that, support that, and react to that as well. So I have to be there with you.
Yeah. Yes, and with so much of, most of the time with the operas, we do have a lot of rehearsal time, but this situation is a little bit different. We don't have so much time with you or with the orchestra. How does that work when you're putting something together so quickly?
Well, first, it's a privilege to work with people like you guys, because you're really fantastic singers, and sometimes to work too much and too long is worse than to work too less.
I agree with you, yes.
And definitely we're going to have a lot of tension and in our performances, also because we didn't have so much work to prepare. So we're going to have we're going to be very much alive, let's say, probably.
Well, as an Italian, when was the first time that you heard La Traviata?
Oh, I was like 2 or 3, I don't know. No, but there's a special thing with this piece. There's few operas that I was brought up with, and Traviata is one of those, Lucia another one, Zauberflöte and Nozze di Figaro, so 2 Mozart, 2 Verdi operas. So I was very lucky as a child to be brought up with those titles, and so this music has been in my head since I'm almost born, actually, So I've heard it so many times, and it's an honor to be here to do it with you guys.
Do you have a favorite part in La Traviata?
Well, I think one of the most special moments for me is, well, there are a few things, but one very particular thing is the beginning of the opera, because one is used to have kind of a, let's open the curtain as an introduction to the opera, and the beginning, Verdi was so courageous with this beginning of the opera, starting with just violins in a 4p, so pianissimissimo, and such a delicate thing that actually a public from the time probably wouldn't even have heard the beginning, I can imagine, because at the time people would go to theater with food and drinks and talk and gossip and all that. And so this beginning is very, very delicate, and this is one of my favorite things.
Yes. And Maestro, how do you feel making your debut at the Royal Opera?
Well, swimming in joy, I have to say. There's a lot of pressure, of course, every time, but you know, as my colleagues, the singers, your colleagues, said before, we have been working as a team very nicely, but also, you know, it's interesting in our job because we don't know each other. We didn't know each other. I met Charles once in my life, and I never met Ermonela. I never met you. And yet, we share huge emotion, and all of us, in a few days. Yes. And this never happened with other people in the world. We need years to build up a friendship, and we just need a few bars to build up a very intense relation between people. So, and this is quite magical, and so I've been very lucky, and I'm looking forward to our rehearsals.
Yes,
actually,
me too.
soon.
I am as well.
Tomorrow.
I'm very excited to. Yes, it is tomorrow.
It is.
I love conductors, and I'm really happy to have the opportunity to ask you this question, because I've always wanted to know. You know, as a singer, we're preparing the music, but I know that some singers do study from the full score, but I often wonder what kind of stress really falls onto the conductor when it comes to excuse me for lack of a better term, but train wrecks with singers and the orchestra, and sometimes we can't hear the orchestra, and sometimes, you know, I know for myself, sometimes I tend to be ahead of the beat. I anticipate the beat sometimes, and that's not always a good thing. Yes, it is good to know before tomorrow. So how does it work with, I mean, I can only imagine the stress that must be there with all of those things, being the liaison that's sort of between what's happening in the pit and what's happening on the stage. How do you manage that?
Yeah, you know, our job is full of stress. Anyway, we are trying to put life into a score that is only printed on paper.
Yes.
And we have a lot of pressure because we need to be good, and we're under judgment all the time from public, critics, colleagues, the orchestra, the chorus, everybody. It's a lot of stress all the time. I always say there is one thing that is a huge help, and it's the music itself. If we would just remind ourselves every 5 minutes in every rehearsal and performance that the music is there actually to help us and to guide us, the stress is really gone. I experienced that many times.
Yes.
So there's let the music hug you, and the stress is really gone. And you know, I mean, there's stressful jobs, and to deal with stress in our job is much easier than to deal in stress without music in other jobs.
Yes.
So we are lucky because we have the music.
Well, Maestro, that's a brilliant answer.
Well,
thank you so much. I look forward to working with you. Thank you so much for spending this little time with me. Ladies and gentlemen, Maestro Antonello Manacorda.
Thank you.
What a pleasure. What a pleasure. See you tomorrow. Ci vediamo domani. The opera is not only about love and passion, but also about illness and disease. To talk to me about the significance of Violetta's death, please welcome back Susan Rutherford. Susan, thank you for joining me again. We had a lovely little chat backstage about La Traviata and the fiasco that it created in 1853. Can you tell me a little bit more about what went wrong at that time?
Well, it wasn't as much of a fiasco as Verdi thought. I mean, it had a respectable run in the Teatro La Fenice, but it certainly wasn't the huge success he was hoping for, in part because of the casting of the central role of Violetta. Verdi had been concerned beforehand that what was needed was a singer con passione, he said, a singer who could sing with passion. Instead, they had Fanny Salvini Donatelli, who was wonderful in the first act with the fioritura, but she was a mature singer, and she wasn't able to deliver the other two acts to gain the trust of the audience, because the other problem really was the subject matter of the opera. This brought the body onto the stage in a way that really was quite new. The body in terms of a site of sexual pleasure, but also in terms of, as you said, of illness and disease. And that was something very new and very different, and needed a particular type of singer to deal with it.
It's fascinating that it was so uneasy for people at that time, but now it's one of the most popular operas. Why do you think that is?
I think that there are aspects of the opera that are that have continued. I mean, at the time, what was remarkable about it was that it showed us death from disease, death, which really hadn't happened before in operatic terms. And for the audience of the day, then in 1880, for example, the average age of mortality for women was in Italy was 34. In Britain, during the 50s and 1850s and the 1860s, when La Traviata was playing here, 40% of the young women in the audience between the ages of 25 and 25 and 44, 40% would die from tuberculosis. Wow. So this was something that touched so many women's lives, so many families, so much death. It's difficult for us to comprehend. we can still, though, the poignancy of that, of early death, is still something that affects us. And what still affects us, really, is the tension that can arise between the privacy and the intimacy of, your closest relationship, and how that is affected or altered by public engagement, by your family or your friends or the state or a religion or all these other things that can intrude. And what the opera represents is a type of social revolution of when opera really stands up for, if you like, everybody's ability to choose their own partner.
Yes, wow, that's beautiful. Thank you for that, Susan. Wow, there's not much to say. Thank you very much for that. We're going to come back and talk about the popularity of the opera in today. Thank you so much, Susan. In just a moment. In Richard Eyre's production, the costumes really take you through the story from glamorous parties with stunning, elaborate costumes to then being transformed into the countryside with minimal and plain clothes. To tell us more about reviving these amazing costumes, please welcome Assistant Head of Opera Running Wardrobe, Helena Rose. Hi, Helena. Thank you for joining me today. So can you tell me a little bit about what you do?
So the team that I am a member of, we look after the artists and their costumes during the rehearsal process on stage and then throughout the course of the run. So we provide not only all the support for quick changes, laundering, repairs, we also provide a support within the Opera House to performers so that they can predominantly concentrate on what they're here to do. We take some of the pressure off, if that's even possible, considering the massive role that you do.
Yes, absolutely. So can you tell us who we have here?
So today we have, this is Flora with her Act 1 dress.
And Flora is Violetta's friend in the opera, yes? Okay.
And we have Alfredo with, this is his Act 2, the first one we see in Act 2, so his country wear. And then Violetta's Act 1 dress, which is probably the most recognisable, being that it's on all the posters and
yes.
beautiful.
Could you tell me a little bit about the top? I actually had a costume fitting the other day, and I have to say, I don't think I've ever thought that I would wear so many corsets in my life, but being an opera singer, that is a part of the job. So, but I have to say, when I tried it on, it was so comfortable. How do you manage to make this, I mean, obviously this isn't my costume, I'm quite taller. How do you manage to make it fit each singer as so well?
Well, we do have, obviously this show has been going for 25 years, so we actually do have quite a few of these particular dresses knocking about, but in some situations we do need to make new ones from scratch. Actually, we've got 2 new ones for this particular revival, and Mary Fisher, our costume supervisor, and her assistant Caroline, they take new and some existing cast members through the fitting process, and then we have an amazing revivals workroom who do all the alterations either in-house or at our premises in Thurrock.
Yes.
And they just make sure that everything is comfortable and tailored to you guys, because some people like their corsets really tight and like to feel really supported. Some people like to feel it a little bit looser so that they've got more space to breathe, a little less restricted. It can even vary between a bit tight at the top and a bit loose at the bottom. So we then have dressers and technicians who remember exactly the specifications for each performer.
What is it like for you, Helena, when you have an artist that comes in and they may, well, this isn't the case for this show, but I'm sure at some point there are singers who come in and they haven't performed the role before, and even singers who have performed the role. Do you have the opportunity to see them sort of transform into this character? I mean, I can say for myself, I know that when I put the dress on, I was ready to sing Sempre, Libera. So have you seen that transformation with the singers?
You know what? That happens every time, and it's so wonderful and so beautiful to see. And I'm so privileged to be able to see that, because it happens in the dressing room and the fitting room, and it's not something that you can see the difference on stage. But Mary works a lot with performers during the fitting process to make sure that everything is comfortable and that people know how to wear these things, because you need to feel like this is what you wear every day. This is not what people wear every day now. So to be able to walk confidently in a crinoline, a lot of people now would just hoik up the front and start charging across the stage, and that's not how it would be. And the way she describes it is beautiful. She said, just imagine 2 little people holding your dress out for you, and you glide along, and it's just lovely to see when people do feel supported and comfortable and ready to go and perform and do the best that they do.
How many layers does this dress have?
Oh, now you're asking. Let's have a look. So we've got 4 layers of a silk cropeline, it's incredibly fine, and this is all hand embroidered. These are the gold decoration is actually an edelweiss. I mistook it for a camellia, but it's an edelweiss. And then we have the satin layers. Then there's a petticoat, and then we have crinoline. So the petticoat actually stops the ridges of the crinoline showing through the dress because the dress is so fine and so light that you would see everything, which actually makes the dress really quite heavy because the petticoat itself is quilted. So, so they are quite warm.
Yes, and the dress is attached to the bodice, is that right?
The dress is attached to the bodice with pieces of elastic which attach onto to buttons on the waistband, which means that even though it looks like a dress, technically they're free moving, so you can feel much more comfortable with knowing that you're not fully restricted with the 2 separate pieces.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Helen. I
welcome.
have a great appreciation for what you do for all of us in the opera. Thank you so much. Helena Rose, ladies and gentlemen. Please now welcome back my good friend, Susan Rutherford, to talk to us about the impact of La Traviata on audiences. I hope you don't mind me calling you my good friend. I think after this we're going to have many phone conversations about operas. Now I have someone I can talk to about everything. But Susan, you mentioned that there was a sort of this outcry by critics of La Traviata where they didn't respond very well to it, but the audience, how did they respond to it?
This is the first opera that we can really identify as attracting a large female audience. In fact, the more the critics said that it was highly immoral and women shouldn't see it, the more they went. And this occurs in all sorts of newspaper reviews of the time, that the women are turning out in their thousands right across Europe. And I think in part because of the things we've said before, Violetta is such a rounded character, especially at the time when perhaps the female characters could be more ciphers, one-dimensional, but Violetta has all these different facets. But also because, although it's about the life of a courtesan, so many arranged marriages at the time meant that for many women, marriage felt itself a type of prostitution. You were sold on behalf of the family to the highest bidder or the best thing. So her situation in some ways didn't feel so very different from that. And the other thing was the aspect of illness and death, and a death at home, a death when she thought everything was going to end happily, and it didn't. And that's an incredibly human predicament and a type of reality that opera hadn't really offered its audiences before.
Yes, it's interesting because Verdi called this piece a subject of our time, and this is over, I think it's 166 years ago, and it still remains so relevant. Why do you think that is?
I think I think her predicament touches us in a very poignant way. And the piece itself is beautifully crafted. Don't you think?
Yes.
There isn't a moment in it, really, that doesn't work. That terrible theatrical catch-all that we never really know quite what it means, but we know when it doesn't work. And this works from the first note to the last. And so it works on our imagination. And, they say there's only 7 stories in the world that we go back to in different times. And this has several of them. It has a girl meets boy. It has a kind of Cinderella element. There's a journey in it. So it comes together in a very neat way. And Verdi, late in his life, talked about how writing the opera, as he said, composing the operas, he would sit there and the tears would pour down his face. He would be so engaged with the vicissitudes of the characters. And I think this is one where, you can feel him weeping, and we all weep with him and with her.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much, Susan, for everything this evening. It's been a beautiful academic chat. Thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you.
Now to hear more about what it's like to direct this opera, please welcome Revival Director Andrew Sinclair. Hi, Andrew. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome, Angel.
Well, I just met you today, so I'm really looking forward to everything that we have ahead of us.
We start tomorrow.
Yes, we do. And as this is coming to a close, I'm realizing that I'm getting a little bit more nervous. But Andrew, please, would you like to share with us, what is your role as the Revival Director?
Well, my role as Revival Director is to recreate as closely as possible the original production, in this case, Richard Eyre's production. And it was interesting what Ermonela said about us being a family, because the degree that one can do that makes the Revival Director's job easy or less so. This production is very good for singers coming into it. And Richard's always been very keen that there should be room for each singer that comes into it to be able to put their own stamp on it. Yes, it works very, very well in that way.
Yes, and with that said, putting your own stamp on it, do you feel that there's a lot of creative freedom as a Revival Director?
Not really. I mean, I think that one's job as a Revival Director is to be faithful to the spirit of the production. And of course you have to change things, of course you do, because people are different. And so one tries to just adapt it a little bit, but without sort of saying, no, we're just going to forget about that and do our own thing.
Yes.
So it's quite an interesting but rather demanding job at times.
And with the production having run for 25 years, what do you bring to it that makes, I guess, creates the magic for each different performer?
Well, it is this thing about this working together. And, you know, they're all very experienced, most of them. And, you know, I was lucky because I was there with Richard when it was new. And so, you know, I had an very clear idea of what he wanted, and also things that can be changed. And he's also been back quite a lot. So that's helped me to know where we can stretch it a little bit, where we can do different things. Yes.
And with that, do you feel that has there ever been a cast where it almost has been identical, or maybe I'm saying this like emotionally, to what the very first cast was? No,
I think that was fairly unique in its time.
Yes.
And there have been some marvelous people in it.
Yes.
And, you know, it's been star vehicles for people as well. And so that's also exciting. And we've also had the occasion where somebody's cancelled at very short notice. And we've had to get somebody 4 or 5 hours notice and put them on. Yeah. And that's created a different sort of magic as well.
Yes. What are you looking forward to seeing the most on stage with this piece?
Well, it's the combination of the artists, there's no doubt about it. But, you know, it's lovely. Every time we do this production, I look at Bob Crowley's sets, and I think how clever they are, because it is essentially traditional. But, for instance, Act 1, Violetta's Party, it's a fabulous sort of golden circular room, which is the epitome of elegance, but it also symbolizes the vortex in which she's become caught in the society. Wow. Then we go to Act 2, which is the country house, and we suddenly realize, because it's not just a very nice country house, it's a very large country house, because you can see through the doors, you can see other rooms and corridors. And then we get to Flora's party, And that's a little bit more sensationalist, perhaps a little bit more vulgar. And then we get to the last act, and Violetta's fabulous world has come down to just this square of carpet, and her bed, and Nina's bed, the stove, you know, and yes, up at the back is this enormous mirror, which reminds her of what she was and now is. And it's really very effective. Every time I see it, I think, wow, this set says a lot about this piece.
Yes. So the audience can expect to be taken through a journey, not just with the music and with the singing, but also with the set.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful.
Most definitely.
How do you feel that La Traviata has changed over the years? Do you feel that it's still, I know that the production, of course, everyone loves the production, and I've seen it several times myself, but do you feel that it is still a radical production, that it still creates the same excitement that it did when it first premiered?
Well, I think that it's a different world these days. And things like gambling and prostitution and were, such taboo subjects when Traviata first appeared.
Yes.
And now we're a lot more liberal. But, I think we just have other things. And I think, this production again, rather than setting it, currently, it gets the audience to think about their own situations today in relation to what might have been in those days.
Yes. What is the relation between the conductor and the director?
Well, this is particularly interesting because with Maestro, this time, there's a real collaboration that we work together. He suggests things, I say, well, I think so and so and so and so, and we try things. And it's been wonderful and very exciting for me.
Yes.
Doesn't always happen.
No, it doesn't.
By any means.
No, it doesn't. And I probably already asked this in some way, but what is your favorite part of the opera?
It's very hard. I mean, as Maestro said, the beginning is amazing. But also the Act Two, yes. The Act Two confrontation, the meeting of Violetta and Alfredo's father, is so strong, particularly in this production, that it's not, he's not a loving father.
No.
And he doesn't know how to handle situations. He regards Violetta as, a whore. She has to be got rid of so that she doesn't, stain the family name. And, he expects it all to be over and done with in 5 minutes. But he finds this really remarkably intelligent and emotional woman. And, when she says, embrace me, when she decides, she knows how she can leave Alfredo, and he'll believe her. She says, embrace me as your daughter. And she embraces him, but he finds this extremely uncomfortable.
Yes.
It's both characters fascinating in this scene.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, of course, the death scene is amazingly moving.
It really is.
And particularly her last surge of energy in this production as well is amazing.
Well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that so much. I look forward to working with you starting
Well,
tomorrow.
likewise, Angel.
Thank you for joining me. Andrew Sinclair.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've enjoyed spending this time with you and learning more about my favorite opera, but sadly that's all the time we've got for this evening. We've had people watching from all over the world, people from South Africa, Egypt, Canada, and the USA, probably my family from the USA. But please join me in thanking all of my guests this evening. You can catch the La Traviata in a cinema near you on the 30th of January or live on stage on January 14th. Thank you so much to all of my guests tonight, including including Susan Rutherford, Ermonela Jaho, Charles Castronovo, Andrew Sinclair, Antonella Manacarda, Helena Rose, Anush Hayosivan, and James Hendry, and a big thank you to my audience in the Clore studio, as well as the audience on YouTube. Thank you so much, and hope to see you all soon.